So far throughout the course, we've been using A1 notation whenever we've referenced a range object. It doesn't matter if it's one cell or multiple cells, we've always used a letter to represent the column and a number to represent the row. Well, now the time has come for us to explore an alternate syntax that we can use to select a range object, and that's the cells property. The cells property actually relies on R1C1 notation, which, as we just learned, relies on a number for both the row and the column. Let's take a look at this in action in the immediate window. Cells is actually a property on the top level application object at the top of the hierarchy. So if I write out application, I'll see that cells is immediately available here and I can use it like this. However, as we know by now, application many times is not necessary as a prefix because VBA can figure these things out. So I can actually just write cells by itself, and by default, this is going to target the entire spreadsheet, so every single cell on it. In fact, I can prove this by using select. So you might wonder how we're able to use select, and the answer is cells right here is going to return a valid range object. So simply by writing cells, this is a range object for every single, the collection of every cell in the worksheet. So all of my range properties and methods are available here, including select. So I can write select here, and that's going to highlight every single cell on my worksheet right here. Of course, the more powerful way to use this property is by providing it a value for both the row and the column. The way we can do that is by feeding it a pair of parentheses. And right here, VBA is giving us a hint, row index and column index. And this represents, of course, the row and the column that we want to reference. So let's say I want to reference row number 2, column number 5. I can just enter that, and that's going to give me a range object that represents that one cell. I can call the select method on this, and we're going to see that that's cell E2. Even though we still have A1 notation enabled on our spreadsheet, we can still use cells right here in VBA. And again, this is a completely valid range object, so I can do whatever I want with it. For example, with this range, I can use the value property to set that cell to a value of 25. When I execute this, it's going to be the exact same as writing range e2.value equals 25. It's just an alternate way to reference a cell, but using row and column numbers. Now, cells, unfortunately, can only accept a row number and a column number. So what do we do whenever we want a range with multiple cells within it? Well, we have to use the familiar resize property because remember, that starts off at a cell and is able to expand to include a much larger range. So remember, for example, if I do something like this, cells, let's say something a little bit closer to the beginning, like cell 2, 1 is going to represent row number 2, column number 1, so cell A2. Once I have the cell, this is a valid range object, so I can use the resize property and then expand that to a larger size. For example, I can do 4 rows downwards and 5 rows to the right. And when I highlight this, we can see that it's done exactly what I expected. We're starting out right here in cell A2, row 2, column 1. We're going 4 columns down and then 5 columns over. And again, resize is also giving me back a valid range object. We're continuing to get back range objects every single time we do some kind of operation here. Cells is giving me a range object. I'm using a resize property on that range object to get back another range object, and then I'm using a method on that. I can just show you another example here. We have the value property available on a multi-cell range as well if we want to overwrite all of the cells. So I can give it a value here like fill, and it's going to write it in all of those cells. That's really all there is to cover here. It's a very quick introduction to cells, but I promise we're going to review this concept a lot as we proceed throughout the course because cells really becomes much more powerful when we have to do multiple operations over, let's say, a range of cells. For example, when it comes to iteration, which is the process of going over one cell at a time. For example, going through every value in column A, performing some kind of calculation, and then writing the result in column B. For that kind of process in VBA, using a syntax like this that uses row and column numbers makes things like mathematical addition, calculation, subtraction a lot easier. We just saw an example a few lessons ago when we talked about R1C1 notation, how it's a lot easier to navigate across columns when you think of them numerically rather than alphabetically. And I assure you that this syntax will pop up a lot of times as we proceed throughout the course, and you're going to see more of its use cases. But for now, you can practice using it just by yourself whenever you're writing some kind of macros on your own. Try to replace your range references that use A1 notation with cells references that use numeric references for both rows and columns. That's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I'll see you in the next one.